What you know, Alibis? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Tuesday, August 26th. Hope you guys are having a good morning so far. I'm going to break today into two different episodes. I'm supposed to be on Banfield at 10 tonight, so if you have News Nation, check it out at 10 Eastern. The plan is to talk about this case. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube and like the video. If you want notifications of when I post new content, click that little bell icon. Appreciate all y'all. Let's jump in. First up on the stand was Jeff Lacasse, Wendy's ex. He started dating Wendi in late September 2013. It was casual and not exclusive. But late February into early March of 2014, they became exclusive. The relationship ended July 14th, just before Dan's murder. He knew of her divorce, and it was a constant topic of conversation. The relocation motion had just been denied right before they started dating, and so she talked about that a lot, as well as the custody issues between her and Dan. He did meet Dan briefly a couple of times when they would exchange the kids. He met Dan at swimming lessons once, and the interactions were polite and cordial. But he said he did adopt the Adelson family narrative about Dan and believed their side. Wendi very badly wanted to relocate to South Florida to be with her family. He said she hated Tallahassee, and that was a daily topic of conversation with her. On their second date, she busted out into tears about the denial of the relocation, which ended their date. He knew Dan was filing for supervised visits with Donna and the boys, because Wendi talked about it a lot. He said she would forward him emails and motions regarding the case, and Wendi took that filing very seriously and was upset when the judge denied it. Time motions were filed, it disrupted their relationship because she would cancel dates, and the whole family would be upset. He said he told law enforcement that the family just didn't have boundaries. He had met the Adelsons. He had dinner with Donna in mid-November 2013 for the first time, and then several times after for things like celebrating Hanukkah or a holiday. And he met Charlie once. That was in March of 2014. Donna was in Tallahassee frequently between September 2013 and early May 2014, mainly to be with the grandkids. Now, he and Wendi went to an alternative spring break in 2014 and spent one night with Charlie. So an alternative spring break, normally college kids go to Cabo or the Caribbean or Miami, but an alternative spring break is where students go and do community service as opposed to go out and partying. His interactions with Donna were quick. They would have dinner and talk a bit just to try to get to know each other, but Donna would excuse herself from the table after about 10 minutes or so. He met Katie at the dinner he went to with Wendi and Charlie. His impression was this dinner was the first time Wendi met Katie. There was lots of talk about Wendi's book she had written, and Dan also came up in their conversation. Sigfredo also was talked about. Katie said her children's father was always in trouble with law enforcement for violent things. After that dinner, he and Wendi went back to Charlie's house to get in the hot tub and the pool, but Katie did not go. He said it was a very nice house. Charlie didn't like Danny, and he said that is understating it. Charlie was fired up, and he was in this protective big brother mode. Charlie made a comment about him knowing people on the wrong side of the tracks with that criminal element, and he said Charlie said this in a very braggy way. Wendi was looking to get her older son tested to see if he could get placed in a gifted school, and Jeff was helping her with that. She asked him, when do kids develop an autobiographical memory? And this falls within his career training. He told her at age 2, kids have amnesia, and by 3 to 4, they start to develop the ability to retain memories. He started to go into the ages of 5 and 6, but there were lots of objections by the defense, and the judge has to get very assertive, telling Donna's counsel to sit down. They approach the bench, and then we take a break. When they come back, they talk about a discovery violation with Jeff in asking about this stuff. Donna's former attorney, Dan Rashbaum, did not depose him as to the child's memories, so the jury is given instruction to disregard all that. He met Wendi at a coffee shop on June 4th, 2014. They were supposed to take a trip together, and she called to talk and abruptly canceled the trip. That trip was scheduled from June 11th through the 17th, and they would have returned home the day before Dan was murdered. Wendi's reasoning for canceling is that she was worried they would not be home in time to pick up the kids around 5 p.m., even though they would have landed the day before. Coming from California, going to Atlanta, there shouldn't have been any weather issues that would have delayed them a day, and it made no sense. Later that evening, they had plans to hang out with the kids, but Wendi told Jeff that she wasn't feeling well and asked him to come over quickly, so he went. While he was on his way, he called to ask if he could get her something for her stomach, and she said no. But once he got there, he realized it wasn't anything like a stomach bug, but it was more that Wendi was anxious and a nervous wreck, and that was what was affecting her stomach. He ended up and went to a convenience store to buy her some Pepto. She just didn't say what the problem was. They move on to the TV, and he saw the broken TV. He said that happened around June 18th. Wendi told him there was a problem, so he turned the TV on. The screen was partially shattered, and it had been struck by an object from what he could tell. He thought it was impossible the kids could have done that. To him, it seemed like a grown person stood in front of that TV and hit it, and there was a crater there. It made the pixels distorted. You could still sort of see what was on the TV, but it's nothing you would want to watch. They were going to have a special date the day before her birthday. He waited for hours, didn't hear from her, and he was worried, so he drove to her house. He knocked on the door for a while, and eventually she came to the door. He said she was intoxicated, and it seemed like she was under the influence of more than alcohol. She wanted him to stay, but he decided to leave. He's handed a text. He said he has only just recently seen this last week for the first time. It was from Wendi to Rob Adelson, her brother, but it concerns Jeff. He's asked, is there anything factually incorrect in this text? And Jeff says, according to Wendi, in this text, it says he had not met Donna or Harvey, and Jeff said it was impossible that they didn't know about me. In fact, Donna wasn't thrilled that Jeff wasn't Jewish. Wendi told Rob he was a secret boyfriend, and Jeff said no. In fact, he had met Donna and Harvey several times, and also Wendi said the kids would talk about Jeff constantly when they were in South Florida with Donna and Harvey. He and Wendi had an argument on June 29th, 2014, and they were in Gainesville, Florida. He confronted Wendi about suspicions that she was seeing other men. He had also spent a few months worried she was just stringing him along, and he said the ride back to Tallahassee was pretty tense. And his impression after getting back was that things might be okay, but he also knew that exchange they had wasn't a great thing for them, but over the next few weeks, they did call and text and did video chats with the kids. He next saw her in person on July 13th. That's the Sunday before Dan was murdered. They went to dinner and a movie and then back to Wendi's house. He said they just had conversations and the kids were not there. He said relocation would come up when Wendi would return from visits to Miami because she was still upset it had been denied and she was nowhere near over it. At this point, he was wondering if it was worth pursuing the relationship. But Wendi did say the only way she could move to South Florida is if something happened to Danny. He said he was getting so tired of this relocation drama, and he told Wendi, you gotta make some peace with this. You are linked to Dan for life. Wendi said, can I tell you something confidentially? Last summer, Charlie looked into all options to take care of the Danny Markell problem, including hiring a hitman, which would cost $15,000. Jeff was aware of the TV joke made by Charlie, but he said this was different. It was disturbing because Wendi was dead serious. On June 14th, the day before the murder, they talked throughout the day to arrange a date, and she said she was excited to see him. So that afternoon, she suggested they meet at yoga. He said Wendi was acting strange, and he really just thought the relationship was over. After yoga, they barely spoke, and he kind of just was getting the vibe it's done. They both drove themselves there, and they're walking to their cars. And as they get about 15 feet apart, Wendi specifically asked what he would be doing Friday as far as his planned trip to Tennessee. Like, what route would he take? Why would you not go? He didn't know why she wanted to know because they had no plans to spend time together on Friday. Now, Dan was killed on Friday, and that route that he would have normally taken put him leaving around 11 a.m., and Wendi knew that. He needed to get to Atlanta, and that would have put him close to Danny's house and consistent in the same location where the killers fled. Now, after all this, he got an email from Wendi. At this point, he thinks the relationship is over, and he knew Wendi didn't like confrontation, so he told her, if you want to break up, just send me an email. She's asking for another week of just no contact. That would bring them to July 31st. He said he didn't respond because she asked for no contact for a week. They show a photo they showed yesterday of the inside of Wendi's residence with the kids' faces blurred. There was a photo wall and nothing ever came off the wall, but July 13th, he noticed Wendi was pulling art off of the wall, and he had never seen her do that. They move on to the celebration dinner that Wendi and Charlie had. During that dinner, Charlie said something to her which he does not know what, but she spontaneously vomited on the table. Now, Jeff was listed as a potential suspect, but he was in Tennessee at the time Dan was murdered. He actually left for the trip the night before at the very last minute. He provided receipts of his trip to law enforcement, and also he got a flat tire, so he was seen on surveillance at Kmart, and they excluded him as a suspect. He later learned the killers came to Tallahassee in both June and July. He started putting the facts together about his travel plans that would have made him a suspect. He said twice in 2014 he leaves town on a trip alone, and both times the hitmen are in town to try and kill Dan. As far as the cars they rented, they got a gray Altima on that first trip, and he said it was as close to his car as you could get as far as a rental. And they show a photo. If you're looking on YouTube, very, very similar. On cross, you testified Donna was aware of the grandmother's motion. Do you know how she took that? He said the family was upset over all the motions, but he did not hear Donna's reaction firsthand. Aside from hearing Charlie in the hot tub, all the information he heard was through Wendi. He's asked if he referred to Wendi as being deeply deceitful, and he said yes with certain topics. You only had limited small talk with Donna, and he says yes. As far as the TV damage, Jeff said it was kind of a spiderweb pattern in the middle of the screen, and that spread it out, and it was pixelated. There was a TV in another room that he wanted to watch, but Wendi made a fuss, and he said he respected that was her home, but also the kids were whining about the TV. The defense says Wendi said to you on July 13th, 2014, that she wanted to tell you things in confidence, and it was that Charlie looked into hiring a hitman. He says that's correct, and that is the end of his testimony. The next witness, June Unchinda, she dated Charlie. She knows Donna from dating Charlie. They dated from October of 2015 through June of 2017. They actually met after the murder. At the beginning of the relationship, which she called a fairy tale, Charlie and the family were not under investigation, so everything was great. She met Donna 5 or 6 times at family events or weekends or just dinners together. She noticed Donna was very involved with her grandkids, and she and Charlie were also very close. She did meet Wendi and the boys, and she had a key to Charlie's place. She said they were together 24/7, and even though she had her own place, essentially she was living with him. She said at that time, Charlie had work stress in the beginning of the relationship, but nothing crazy, and he didn't seem angry. When she asked about his family in the beginning, Charlie said his brother-in-law was murdered, and they don't know who did it. But that topic never came up again before the investigation started. She did a law enforcement interview, and she says she didn't know she was being recorded. She said in that interview that Adelsons weren't ever curious about who killed Dan or even upset about it. Charlie did not tell her about the bump, and she said she may have learned about it on an episode of 2020, or maybe he told her after the fact. Around that time, Charlie wasn't sleeping. He was up all night, seemed extra stressed, anxious, and over time became depressed. She learned Charlie was under investigation from a reporter that came to his house. This was in May or June of 2016, and that would have been after Sigfredo was arrested. She also learned from the media something that stood out. The hitmen said they were paid with stacks of 100s that were stapled together. There's some confusion on Direct and Cross about whether or not she knew about the stapled money before or after, but on Direct, she said that after she found out, she noticed Charlie stapled his money. In the time between the weeks before the article was published, she saw on some episode that Charlie started to communicate more with Katie. They were going back and forth, so she asked Charlie why they talked so much. She said, "You never talked to me like that, so why her?" She told law enforcement Charlie didn't wake up early and he would be on the phone with Katie at 7 a.m. He was very paranoid in this time frame, and around this time too, he talked a lot about his phone possibly being tapped. She actually met Katie before she met Charlie. Katie worked at a dermatologist office that she went to. And then she's asked who is Charlie's most recent girlfriend before her, and that was Whitney. She never knew of Katie working for Charlie or the Adelson Institute. His erratic behavior got worse after Katie's arrest, and their relationship took a really big turn. He would go to his friend's house more often, and their whole routine got disrupted. She just didn't know exactly why. He was angry and short-fused. But when the investigation came up, he would have very different emotions ranging from anger, he would get red, he would scream, he would take random walks acting like a crazy person. He got another phone, which disappeared shortly after he got it. He also started talking to her through WhatsApp. That started when he went to Asia, but they kept that habit when he got back. He also started keeping a bag of clothes by his bed, and she knew he had guns all over the place. She's asked about an argument between Wendi and Charlie. He told her it was over the case. Around this time, Donna's behavior also was more upset, and she said to law enforcement that Donna was a mess, just not her usual self. And she talked about one time Donna was crying, and Charlie told her Donna was taking pain pills for stress. There was one time on the balcony of Donna and Harvey's place, they were talking about Dan because the case had blown up. Donna said their lives were crumbling down, and it felt like Dan was haunting her or them from the grave. Charlie told her after the 2020 episode that he joked about Katie's boob job, saying they think he paid for all of it when Charlie said he only paid for one. He was laughing, so she just took it as a joke. On Cross, when you gave your law enforcement interview, you and Charlie were going through a rough patch. She told law enforcement that Charlie was good at persuading people and makes it believable. She's asked about the cash she saw at Charlie's place, and you said Rivera said he was paid in stapled cash and a light bulb went off in your head. Charlie stapled his money and also kept that money in a large safe, which was about the size of a refrigerator, and there were also guns in there. The defense mentions she has testified in 4 trials, including this one. But on Direct, you said you didn't think the Adelsons were curious about who killed Dan. Then you later say you were speculating about that. Yes. You testified in Katie's second trial about Donna saying that Dan was haunting her, but you came off this statement. You said it wasn't the exact words she said, that Donna was upset and it just came out like that. The defense reads from Katie's trial transcript, which says, "I don't know. I think she was so stressed and that's how it came out." And that was the end of her testimony. Next up, Ryan Fitzpatrick. He was good friends with Charlie from 2013 to 2020-ish. He said Charlie was close with Wendi and Donna did not like Dan. Charlie had a lot of girlfriends, and he had met Katie once or twice in passing, and she didn't stand out to him. He said she looked like the others he dated, but just didn't stand out. He knows Charlie staples his money. 10 100s equals 1,000, and he has been paid by Charlie with the stapled cash. Now, the murder happened prior to them getting closer as friends. Charlie never discussed Dan. And he said it was odd because it wasn't being discussed. As far as the bump, Charlie talked to him about that. He had never mentioned being harassed or extorted before the bump. After the bump, Charlie became agitated, nervous, anxious, and he says, looking back now, guilty and just abnormal. Charlie told Ryan he could get away with anything if you keep your mouth shut, including murder. The arrests that were happening caused Charlie's behavior to increase. He became more needy, and he said Charlie talked a lot. And he would say things repeatedly to maybe help himself believe something or to get you tired enough of hearing it that you would just believe it. He said Charlie was not stressed about the murder before the bump, but afterwards, that changed. On Cross, when you gave your deposition, you said you barely knew Donna, that she was always nice to you and her and Harvey were pleasant to be around. And he says yes. The defense points out that the friendship had a very ugly ending. And they ask about the stapling of the money again, and he confirms it. They say in the deposition, you said it was known the Adelsons didn't like Dan, but you couldn't come up with a specific statement. And he said no, but it was implied. And that's where we left off before lunch. So look for part 2, recapping the afternoon session later this evening. That is it for now. Hope you guys have a good rest of your afternoon. We will see you soon.